To what extent does corruption within countries block your ability to be effective, constrain the ability of the IDB to be able to make the kinds of contributions necessary to affect long-term change?
Well, I would divide this into two categories. One is corruption associated and the controls that we have for associated with the projects that we do, the financing that we do, and the kinds of controls that we have. And the other is the larger issue. In terms of more broadly, the way to attack corruption, of course, is to have good institutions in governments that can, not only from the judicial side, but more on the control establishment, being a general accounting office, being the prosecutors and the whole attorney general's office. All of that part in a government becomes critical. And so we do a lot of work in supporting, for instance, all of the control, we call them control institutions that do control of the government. And that is a fundamental part. But just as important is what society does. I mean, to empower journalists that report this and are not later put in jail. The fact that society as a whole keeps this issue very much as an important issue in the agenda. And I think you see this throughout Latin America, in some countries more than others. On the other hand, in terms of the projects that we do, we have a number of mechanisms where people can report that if, say, the construction of a hydro project and there was a tender and they picked one vendor vis-a-vis the other and there was some corruption associated, we have ways that people can report where there is whistleblower protections and investigations that are done independent of bank staff. That for purposes of an independent investigation mechanism. And then vis-a-vis our own staff, we have the same process and ethic codes and all of that of the highest standard that needs to happen. And fundamentally, another part, it is a transparency of information. It is, and we have been going through a process of really providing as much information as we can to the public. So all of that combined, I think, helps give a lot of transparency on what we do.
Okay, thank you. Just 2 weeks ago, you and Energy Secretary Stephen Chu signed an agreement. Oh, it's okay. Signed an agreement regarding clean energy and climate change. Tell us about that project and what you hope that will enable you to achieve in the region.
When you think at ways that we can connect the Americas, there's no question that one of the ways to connect it is through doing a lot of things in the area of climate change and more importantly, sustainable development. Secretary Chu, what we're going to do with the Department of Energy is create a center at the IDB that will help basically work with all countries in the region to learn of best practices, to be able to reproduce those best practices, to provide that information to many countries, to staff it with people from all the region, from the US and others. We've had a lot of interest from China, from countries in the hemisphere, Venezuela, among others, who want to use this center as a way to project out some of the best lessons learned. And I think if you look at this hemisphere, certainly Latin America and the Caribbean, still almost 82% of all electricity is generated by hydro. So it's a very clean energy matrix that we have today. The carbon emissions that take place in Latin America are mostly in grazing, in the destruction of rainforest, and certainly what happens in cities through old automobiles or lack of good mass transit systems. But I believe that in this hemisphere there's a lot that we can do, and we have been working and using some of the new technologies that are coming about. And this is another area that we can work very closely with the US as well.
Great, thank you. A couple questions from our colleagues. First, describe the nature of the working relationship you have with the World Bank and the IMF. You've now been in office for 5 years. You've worked with a couple of World Bank presidents. How would you describe the nature of the working relationship and in the current dynamics under the leadership of Bob Zoller?
Well, first of all, I knew both Wolfowitz and, of course, Bob Selig. I worked with Bob Selig a lot when the years I was as ambassador. I think he's done a tremendous job at the World Bank. He's a really, really competent and visionary leader. In the case of the World Bank, we are complementary. And a lot of the discussions that took place, especially over the last year and a half, is how we could work in a way that we are precisely complementary. So we'll have cases like, say, I don't know, Uruguay in the education sector. They'll do the secondary education and we'll do the primary education. There's some countries in Latin America that they simply don't have either offices or participate at all. They have concentrated a lot of their efforts on some of the larger countries, and for instance in Haiti, we had a very strong presence, which the World Bank had a very small presence. Now, of course, with everything that happened, we're looking in ways to coordinate. In this case of Haiti, there was a multilateral trust fund that was created. They are basically the ones who are in charge of doing the fiduciary responsibility. We, on the other hand, had a lot more expertise on the ground because of the years we were working in Haiti, so we were doing more there. In terms of the IMF, certainly we do development finance. The IMF basically looks to support countries when they have balance of payments difficulties. So it's a very different kind of work, but certainly when you have situations in certain countries that require not only development finance, but also a big package like something that would be happening in a country like Greece, we all come in and participate and provide for a large package of financing that in turn a country can commit to doing a number of things whereby in the final analysis they can be solving their immediate financial crunch.